My dad works in B2B marketing. He came by my school for career day and said he was a big ROAS man. Then he told everyone how much he loved calculating his return on ad spend. My friends still laugh at me to this day.
Not everyone gets B2B, but with LinkedIn, you'll be able to reach people who do. Get a $100 credit on your next ad campaign. Go to linkedin.com/campaign to claim your credit. That's linkedin.com/campaign. Terms and conditions apply. LinkedIn, the place to be, to be.
Move your career further, faster in just 2 days with a Harvard Professional and Executive Development Program. Advance your leadership skills, craft smarter business strategies, build your network, and transform how you work and think to keep your career moving forward. You'll earn a certificate and can add Harvard to your resume with Harvard Professional and Executive Development. Learn more at professional.dce.harvard.edu/Spotify.
Hey, I'm Ryan Reynolds.
Recently, I asked Mint Mobile's legal team if big wireless companies are allowed to raise prices due to inflation. They said yes. And then when I asked if raising prices technically violates those onerous two-year contracts, they said, "What the f*** are you talking about, you insane Hollywood ass?" So to recap, we're cutting the price of Mint Unlimited from $30 a month to just $15 a month.
Give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
$45 upfront payment equivalent to $15 per month. New customers on first 3-month plan only. Taxes and fees extra. Speed slower above 40 gigabytes. See details.
It is nearing the Winter Solstice, and it is the first of this holiday season where Feyre can enjoy the celebrations with those she loves. While questions of gifts and who will visit abound, each member of the inner circle finds themselves still struggling with the aftermath of the war with Hybern. Though the snow attempts to wipe away the dark memories in earnest, some wounds still require healing.
The views expressed by the hosts are entirely their own and in no way represent the thoughts or intentions of the original author. This podcast is a discussion shared to spark thought and conversation on characters and themes of this novel.
Though the hosts speak mostly within the constraints of this book, series spoilers may be discussed with or without warning. Explicit language, as well as themes of sex, violence, abuse, death, and depression, will recur throughout the podcast. Listener discretion is advised.
Thank you to all of our Patreon supporters with a special shout out to our June 2023 Trophy Wives. Thank you Amanda, Catherine, Shannon, Veronica, Anne, Jackie, Violet, Jen, Nicole, Kathleen, Amelade, Jessica, Helen, Danica, Carissa, Sierra, Colleen, Alexa, Sam, and Allison. To learn more about becoming a Trophy Wife, visit patreon.com/booktalkforbooktalk. Thanks, Trophy Wives! Are you surprised? If you didn't join us for our June 10th announcement, you may not have realized that we planned on analyzing A Court of Frost and Starlight as an additional season. Now, because this is the 4th book and this is the 4th season, we're doing 4 episodes. Also because it's a short book.
Also because math.
Math.
Everything ACOTAR related is fair game this season, folks. However, we will continue to keep any spoilers or references to other SGM works in the breadcrumbs as much as possible. We are human, though, so we may slip up, and we apologize now for all of them. If you haven't listened to season 1 through 3, we highly recommend that you do so.
If you don't know who we are, we're Book Talk for Book Talk, a podcast that conducts a critical literary analysis of your favorite novels. This season, we're diving into the final chapter of Feyre's journey in Sarah J. Maas's original Court of Thorns and Roses series, A Court of Frost and Starlight. I'm Jac, and I'm back with the feminist lens. Through the feminist lens, I will discuss heterogender norms and stereotypes, which in no way reflect my personal views on gender and will only be a tool I use to discuss aspects of this novel.
This is Amy, and I will continue to provide analysis through a Marxist lens, where I will view different power dynamics amongst characters and the world itself.
Before we dive into this episode, we'll give you a little background on who we are. I'm Jac, an avid reader and writer. I enjoy reading fantasy, but also love a good smutty book. I did my bachelor's in creative writing and received a master's in comparative literature, which taught me how to critically read and discuss literature.
I'm Amy, a lover of all things related to writing. I've had a love of literary analysis since it was ingrained in me during high school. I met Jac when we attended the same creative writing bachelor's program, after which I received my master's in education.
Themes we're going to see in this book include home and healing.
The question we ask ourselves this week is, are the Inner Circle members ready for healing?
The theme we'll see in this section is untended wounds.
We start Frost and Starlight with snow. We're going to muse a lot on the use of snow in Frost and Starlight, but to do so, I think it's important to identify the other times snow has been present in the Court of Thorns and Roses series. In Thorns and Roses, there is snow falling in the first chapter when Feyre kills Andress, which leads to Tamlin taking her to the Spring Court. In Mist and Fury, it's also snowing outside the cabin in the mountain, where Feyre and Rhys end up solidifying their mating bond. Then in Wings and Ruin, we see snow when Feyre goes and retrieves the Ouroboros. I think snow has an important place in this series, and the fact that it's snowing all the time right now in this book, while appropriate for the season, may have some deeper meaning.
There's this beautiful imagery of beginning and end. Snow in winter is oftentimes associated with death and the end, which is how Book 1, Feyre, viewed snow. It was just a time to survive. Now in this book, Feyre enjoys it and even likes the feeling of being cold, like it's a novelty. In regards to her powers, she even considers it to be playful. I'm not saying that Feyre's life is ending, but this book is the last book that we are getting from her perspective. As far as we know, SJM might change that. So it makes sense, though, that SJM would end Feyre's story the way that it started. She was starving, now she's fed. She was alone, and now she has family.
I love that point because we're going to see a lot of that comparison to Feyre's life in the beginning and where it is now. And you can almost say that this is a rebirth, where the winter in the first book was a near death. Here it's a rebirth, starting a new beginning for her and her future with Rhys. Feyre calls out that first winter night in Thorns and Roses when she thinks about the snow. And in doing so, she reminds readers just how far she's come since then. Quote, "It had been a long, brutal winter that had brought me so deep into the woods that day nearly 2 years ago, desperate enough to kill a wolf, that it eventually led me here, to this life, this happiness." This is even illustrated by the fact that that night Feyre was starving, hunting to feed her family, and yet the Feyre here and now is, quote, "devouring a breakfast of toast and bacon, washing down with a heady cup of tea." A lot of Frost and Starlight is going to be about reminding us of Feyre's journey and how we've neared a beautiful end to her story, or a new beginning, even if she will continue to grow and progress long after the narration moves on for her.
Amy likes to think of this book as an epilogue to Wings and Ruin, and I completely agree. I like to imagine that it's also a bridge between Feyre and Nesta's story. We are going to get tons of Nesta imagery and clues here. This is one that stood out initially, not because SJM did it on purpose necessarily. I think it might be one of those smaller subconscious writer moments. Feyre says that the first snow of winter, quote, "whipped through Velaris." And the last time we had wind whipping anything, it was Nesta's tears while she watched her father and his ships arrive for the final battle.
Great connection.
Yeah, it's all these little tiny things.
Mm-hmm. One of the really beautiful things about Frost and Starlight is just how many parallels to the first 3 books SJM stuffs into the story. I've already alluded to one from Thorns and Roses. Let me throw another one at you. In Mist and Fury, Feyre dealt with her PTSD from under the mountain by starving herself and sleeping. She did not have the tools to process her guilt or her trauma, and she was not supported the way she needed to be supported by Tamlin, who was also, frankly, processing his own trauma. When Feyre wanted to help the villagers rebuild in the Spring Court, Tamlin wanted her to stay inside and paint. Here, in Frost and Starlight, Feyre is dealing with the trauma of losing Rhys by throwing herself into work around Velaris and helping the city rebuild, or its citizens gain access to resources that they need. It's both a great parallel and a huge contrast to Feyre's time in the Spring Court. Feyre even goes so far as to almost overwork herself because she refuses to relax. Because, in my mind, relaxing is equivalent to the Spring Court, which is equivalent to complacency.
I love that, but I really like to relax.
That's why you're a Spring Court girly.
I know, my body's not made for it, but my personality is. There are so many parallels, and what makes this book different is the moving forward part. Feyre and company are trying to move forward past the war, minus Nesta, and they're throwing themselves into their work. This whole book starts with Feyre and Rhys tired and exhausted, busy trying to put their life and the world back together, but also busy because they don't want to deal with the trauma. Feyre even says, quote, "Playing with the ice and snow could wait," and throws herself into a distraction. One of the main arguments Amy and I are going to have in this book is why it makes sense that Feyre decides to have a baby. Her mentality at the start of this book is about, let's say it together, surviving, not thriving. Oh my God, you said it together. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I never expected that. That means a lot.
You're
Thank
welcome.
You. Surviving looks a whole lot different than it did in book 1, but that's life. Our needs grow, and what used to be enough for us years ago may not be enough now, and that's okay. Feyre's journey is about figuring out how to thrive in her new reality, and the idea of things can wait is something that she's going to be working through this entire book. One thing that I've learned to appreciate about this book is how hard SJM goes with the symbolism and metaphors, and I think SJM is busy having a lot of fun as a writer, and you can really see that in moments like these. Quote, "Had he, Rhys, been only a minute later, the mother knew what would have happened. Snow swirled and eddied in the garden, catching in the brown fibers of the burlap covering the shrubs. My mate, who had worked so hard and selflessly." See what she did there? Rhys is the burlap protecting Feyre, aka the shrubs, and there's going to be a bunch of these moments, and I will love pointing them out.
Aside from Rhys, one particular image that really haunts Feyre that we see in this first chapter is, quote, "Nesta leaning over a wounded Cassian, the two of them prepared to die together." So here's a teaser. I'm going to spend this novel arguing that Feyre has really come to love and cherish Nesta, a huge departure from Feyre of early Thorns and Roses, which is what makes Nesta's own pain and rejection of her sisters all the harder for us to process. This image that Feyre sees of Nesta protecting Cassian, prepared to die, is going to reoccur, and it's one piece of evidence of this love Feyre has developed for her sister.
I love this so much, and when you keep that in mind, just imagine how hard it must have been for Feyre, for anyone, to watch someone that you love be willing to die when they had a chance to run away. But you also can't blame her because you would do the same thing. That's the angst.
I actually just had a thought. Feyre could be resentful of Nesta because Nesta never did that for Feyre when Feyre was a teenager hunting for them, right? Nesta never did anything to protect Feyre from Feyre's point of view, necessarily.
Yeah.
And she could be resentful that Nesta chose to protect Cassian, but instead she just loves Nesta more.
Yeah, I think she loves Nesta more. I think she sees it as growth too. And we already know at this point, Feyre suspects that they're mates. Also, if we didn't say it at the top, but if you haven't read Silver Flames,
we can't help you.
No, I'm sorry. But yeah, we know that we know Feyre suspects that they're mates. And it just was such a mate moment that if there's anything that Feyre gets, it's the mating bond. Which is why she kind of not pushes Elaine with Lucian, but she's like, come on.
Yeah.
Here's your mate.
Another theme we see in the first chapter I want to bring up, but may never mention again, is that Feyre twice alludes to priestesses or their temples in a negative way, reminding us of her negative experiences with Ianthe and therefore negative perception of the group overall. Here's a few quotes as an example. Quote, "I tried not to look too relieved that I wouldn't be dragged to a temple for hours." Quote, "I scowled at the pile of papers I had to sort through, priestesses angling for positions." This is extremely different from how Nesta will experience priestesses and temples in Silver Flames, which is a reminder to me of how slanted Feyre's view can be because of our individual experience. This is one of the things that can make her an unreliable narrator. But for now, this is just me acknowledging SJM as an excellent writer and how she's able to be consistent within a single character, but how her characters can also vary vastly from each other. It's just amazing.
It's very amazing. And then when you think about how Rhys is cool with the priestesses too.
Despite the fact that he's been abused by one.
Yeah, he doesn't hold it against the rest of them.
Yeah.
He connects with the other ones.
Mm-hmm.
Come on, Feyre.
She doesn't look at the priestesses in the library badly, but she still has
an aversion
to them for sure.
It just shows trauma.
Yep.
I want to look a little bit more on Feyre reflecting on her life. Quote, "A year ago, I'd been stuffed into fine gowns and jewels, made to parade in front of a preening court who gawked at me like a prized breeding mare." Amy, look me in the face and tell me this isn't about the night court.
Court of Nightmares.
That one. That one. I know she's talking about the spring court, but you can say that immediately about the Court of Nightmares as well.
Oh yeah, that was totally Moore's experience in the Court of Nightmares.
I mean, it's also Feyre's experience in the Court of Nightmares because Rhys did the exact same thing to her there. He put her in dresses and jewels and had her parade around.
Yep.
But I would like to point out that maybe that comment is more than just Tamlin. Maybe it is about her experience as being a pawn with Rhys in the Court of Nightmares versus now she's High Lady. Also, because I can't let any Lucien and Elaine content go, it breaks my heart that Elaine keeps avoiding Lucien and she doesn't even ask about his face after he gets beat up by Tamlin. Rude.
Well, Elaine is rude. We're going to get into that later.
Elaine is rude. And Feyre, shut up.
We'll get into that later. The theme of home, which started in Mist and Fury, makes a reappearance here as well. While it does serve as a breadcrumb for Feyre's solstice gift from Rhys, it is also a nice way to signal how far Feyre has come in her journey. Quote, "I loved this house, the townhouse. It was my home. The first I'd really had in the ways that counted." What Feyre will discover in this novel is how home can change and evolve with her, which is amazing for a person who didn't know what home meant for a long time. Chapter 2 moves from Feyre's point of view to Rhys's. Note that in this novel, we get 5 total points of view. Feyre and Rhys are the first 2, both told in the first person, because in my mind, they're basically the same person. Then we have Cassian, Mor, and briefly Nesta, all told in the third person. This changing the points of view throughout the book is going to prepare readers for the switch in narrative style for Silver Flames, where the book is told from Nesta's and Cassian's points of view in the third person. This is going to be a huge change for SJM's readers, and so this novel is like a warm-up, and so every time someone tells me they skipped it, I wag my finger at them.
You say, no, no, no.
You don't skip this one.
I mean, when you look at all of SJM's work, though, A Court of Thorns and Roses, the first 3, 4-ish books, they're the only ones in first person.
Mm-hmm. And there was a reason for it.
Yeah, but all the other ones aren't.
But if this is the first set of SJM books you've ever read?
Absolutely. But I'm just telling the other people they're wrong. But it was the same thing for me. When I first read A Court of Thorns and Roses, it was first person. It's what I was used to.
Yeah.
And then I devoured Throne of Glass. And I always say that, like, I don't really remember it because it was a fever dream. Mm-hmm. And I think half of it I was frustrated because of how different the style was.
Because you read and write in first person.
Me?
Yes.
Do I?
Yes.
Yeah. I had to think about that.
Yeah, you really struggle with multi-point of view.
Yeah, I do. Which is hard because both of the books I'm working on multiple point of views. I'm opening up.
You are opening up.
But I am of just give me one perspective. I don't need more.
Right.
Close me off.
And there are people who have that preference, and that's okay. But there's a reason why you read this book, so that you mentally prepare.
Otherwise, Amy will wag her finger at you.
I will wag my finger.
When SJM flexes her muscles, that's when we appreciate it. Quote, "The watery winter sun tried and failed to bleed through the clouds looming over the Illyrian mountains, the wind a boom across the gray peaks." Is it one of my favorite lines? Maybe not, because she has a bunch of amazing lines, but I just really love seeing SJM in her element. I think she even mentioned that this almost is like her fan fiction.
And she just gets to have fun.
This is such a fun book. Even in the angsty moments, you can tell she's having fun writing those moments.
Yeah, it really shines through. So, like I was saying, with the POV being a warm-up for Silver Flames, similarly, Chapter 2 and, if you think about it, Chapter 3 are laying a ton of groundwork for Silver Flames. So much about Illyrian points of view toward women, toward Rhys and Cassian after the war, and Illyrian traditions in general are brought up in this chapter, all essential to the plot in Silver Flames. For example, we learn that Devlin is the only tolerant camp lord, but even he still struggles with taking training of the females seriously, and that's an important mindset to take note of for Silver Flames. We also learn about the discontent among the various Illyrian camps, which honestly does a lot to influence the plot in Silver Flames. So it's just chef's kiss.
Chef's kiss.
Because we don't know it. at the time.
No. And I think people are, if they do read it, power through it so quickly.
Mm-hmm.
And we're going to get later into this chapter how much SJM was saying, like, here you are.
I am telling you the plot of the next book.
Basically, yeah, the plot is here. Rhys talks about trying to change their structure in the summer when they have resources and the climate has calmed down. And again, like the plot, it's Nesta. It's everything is happening there. What we also get is Cassian dealing with his own PTSD, not just because of what happened to him and Nesta, but also because he has so much guilt losing so many soldiers during the war. When I think of Silver Flames, I personally think mostly of Nesta's journey, and I've never really given Cassian the credit that he too is going through some really heavy stuff. But this book does a lot to set it up and shows that Cassian is grieving. And Cassian struggles to cope with his relationship with the Illyrians, which again, we'll see later in this chapter, but like that's a really complex set of emotions to be able to say like, I love this group of people, but I hate them so much, but I believe in them. But damn it, they're not changing.
Yeah, and I'm proud to be one, but I fucking want to bash them all on the head.
Yeah, it's complex.
It's very complex.
We see Rhys is very much concerned about his time of intimacy with Feyre being cut short because of their schedules. And while he's in the cabin at the camp, he thinks about Feyre and misses having sex with her. It's more than just sex, of course. It's about intimacy, and we know that with Feyre, it's about healing. So Rhys knows that for them to heal, they have to be together. They have to have that time together. So what's the best solution in order to have more time to have sex and not be interrupted at all? You have a child, because that's what happens? I don't know.
No, that is not what you do.
No, I think their decision, which again, we're going to keep talking about throughout the whole entire book, is, okay, we need to take a step back. Life is not about work. Mm-hmm. Life is about life. Right.
And I mean, obviously, their solution to have a kid is not to solve this problem, right?
No.
Jac is being facetious.
Yeah, absolutely.
And right now, having kids is not on the table, and Rhys knows that.
They actively say multiple times of like, this is the worst time to possibly have kids.
Yeah, exactly.
We could never have a kid now.
It's ironic. What I found interesting in this chapter is there's a lot of Nesta that we see from Rhys's point of view. And it's vital to pay attention to this to understand how their relationship is poisoned by the time we get to Silver Flames. Rhys professed to really dislike Nesta in Mist and Fury, claiming that he would never forgive Nesta for making Feyre hunt as a child and doing nothing herself. He even repeats that sentiment in this book. However, in Wings and Ruin, he seemed to treat her with a little bit of respect by the end of the novel, having named her emissary by the High Lord meeting, and he didn't reiterate that I'll never forgive her stuff. Like, we only heard it in book 2 and now.
Yeah.
It's a weird jump for me, but it's there. Jac also talked a lot in episode 20 of season 3, how Nesta made decisions during the final battle in Wings and Ruin that set up Rhys to resent Nesta. I think this is really emphasized in this chapter by the way Rhys views Nesta through Feyre and Cassian. For example, Rhys sees the image of Nesta and Cassian prepared to die together through Feyre's memories. He also sees how Feyre wakes from nightmares about that moment. I think Rhys resents Nesta for it. I mean, Nesta's the one who knew she was going to die and took Cassian, and they didn't listen to Rhys when he said no.
Yeah.
Also, it would just be easier for Feyre in general if she didn't care about Nesta. Same goes for Cassian's feelings too, especially since we see Rhys tiptoe around the topic of Nesta when he's with Cassian several times throughout the book. We see a spark of that resentment when Rhys tells Cassian that Nesta will be at Solstice, quote, and she'll be pleasant. She owes Feyre that much.
I was just thinking about, you're saying how Nesta brought Cassian along because she was ready to risk him. And that's true. We talked about that in Wings and Ruin. But now that I'm thinking about it, when Feyre is looking through the cauldron's eyes and then they didn't stumble, but they find Nesta, that's when Feyre says, oh shit, she wasn't sacrificing herself. She's here to kill.
Yeah.
So that could be another moment of Rhys saying like, okay, so maybe she wasn't really trying to get or willing to put Cassian's life on the line.
Right.
Which I make a point a bit. And so just hold on to that thought. So hear us out, because Amy and I had very similar thoughts here. I think it's clear that Rhys doesn't like Nesta, as we've talked about. Let's all agree on that. Let me read these 2 lines. Quote, Nesta had successfully cloistered herself in some slummy apartment across the Sidra, refusing to interact with any of us save for a few brief visits with Feyre every month. I'd have to find a way to fix that too. And then he does this.
So what he does is at the end of the chapter, Rhys asks Cassian if he's happy, and Cassian is barely able to respond. Rhys thinks to himself, quote, I'd have to work on that too. Perhaps there were threads to be pulled, woven together. So I have so many thoughts about the sentence, so does Jac. Let's start with the fact that during his final speech at the start of the final battle in Wings and Ruin, Rhys talks about the tapestry of fate. As we know, we will also encounter a weaver in Frost and Starlight, so imagery around weaving and threads is going to be huge. By thinking, quote, perhaps there were threads to be pulled, woven together, Rhys is thinking about what strings he can pull or what things he can do to provide Cassian with something that could help him be happy. Here's a Silver Flame spoiler. The great irony here is that fate is literally going to pull these strings itself. Or is it Rhys? I'm going to let Jac answer that question. Nesta will be banished to the House of Wind, where she will be forced to spend time with Cassian, and then in the end they will discover that they are mates. I don't know if I think that's what Rhys had planned. I think the Mother or Fate just took over, but Jac, I'll let you go.
I think it was Rhys. Because when you think about it, why was it done at that exact moment, right? Like with kicking Nesta's ass and saying, okay, now we're over your shit. Why did it let it get to the point that they were like, okay, Cassian's finally willing to step in, despite how much he was hurting? And why the summer? Because everything that they're listing now of, we need things to calm down, we need things to, better climate. And then suddenly that's when they start going after saying, hey, Nesta, you got to clean your shit up. Because also the baby would hopefully soften Nesta up too. Summer's calmer, like I was just saying. And because Rhys wanted to fix the two people at once, it might seem obvious to some, but let's fully appreciate how much I feel like Rhys is a mastermind here. One of my favorite sayings that I tokened is revive two birds with one breath. Mm-hmm. And this feels like I'm fixing Feyre, I'm fixing Nesta, and I'm fixing Cassian moment. I know that Rhys doesn't like Nesta, and I know that he says that he doesn't forgive Nesta for what she did to Feyre, but Rhys just said that Nesta is an Illyrian at heart. She proved that she was ready to die with Cassian. Let's remember when Rhys said he realized that he loved Feyre. It's when she threw the spear at the Mittengard worm. Oh no, she threw it at Amarantha. And he looked at her and was like, damn, I like that piece of ass. But he was like, that's the moment he was saying, oh, she's one of us. As much as Rhys struggles with Nesta, he's holding her to a higher regard than Elaine, because Nesta is essentially one of us. She's an Illyrian, which is why I think it makes sense that Elaine will leave with Lucien when he becomes a High Lord, because she's not one of them. But thoughts. But maybe this is Rhys wanting Nesta to be happy on a certain level too, because he begrudgingly likes her.
He does begrudgingly like her, even though he says he hates her. And I don't think Rhys is one to keep mates apart.
Yeah, it makes absolute sense where I think he got a taste of what it's like to be on the same team with Nesta in Wings and Ruin. And he can see that she's going through it. And as we know in Silver Flames, Cassian points out all the times that he, Azriel, Rhys, Mor all went through long depressive periods. Mm-hmm. Which, I think he said his was 50 years long or something like that. And you guys couldn't even give Nesta a year. Yeah. But that could be Rhys, because I really do believe he's the one who was saying, okay, time for everyone to get this together, wrap it up, everyone be together. I think he wants Nesta to be back on the team. He wants Feyre to be happy, most of all. And he wants Cassian to be happy. He's a mastermind.
He might be.
Now, I think the fact that, the baby might kill Feyre and then, Nesta snitching, that wasn't within his control.
Right. And he's probably genuinely angry at her by that point.
It's his fault. You shouldn't have.
Don't lie to your wife.
Did she do it out of spite? Yes. Was it the right thing to do? Yes.
Chapter 3 shifts to Cassian's point of view. It's the first time we get to see the world through his lens. I want to point out something from Chapter 2 that Rhys thinks because it's relevant now, at least to me. when thinking on his past with Cassian and Azriel at the Illyrian camp run by Lord Devlin. Rhys recalls that Lord Devlin, quote, treated us to the same rights as full-blooded Illyrian warriors, still did that for all the bastard born under his command. Now we know Rhys is half Illyrian, but I thought Rhys was the only one half Illyrian. The way this is written, it implies maybe that all three of the Bat Boys are half-breeds, but it could also just be written in an unclear way.
Yeah, for Cassian specifically, I always imagine him as being, maybe the Illyrians have like these like pure-blooded warriors, right? And he's not from one of those high-ranking families and his mom is a cast-off. I thought with Azriel, his mom was the mistress and his dad was the lord, so I don't know.
Who knows?
Not us.
Not I. One of the reasons why I think there's a potential for Cassian to be half Illyrian, in Chapter 3, Cassian thinks about how his wings, quote, were wider and broader than theirs, other Illyrians.
Oh, damn. Did you have that in your notes?
Yeah.
I'm appreciating it now.
Could it be, then, that Cassian and Azriel are so strong and are bigger than other Illyrians? They also have this unprecedented 7 siphons, which is absurd. Could they both be half something not Illyrian?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, there's the theory about Azriel's parentage, which we won't get into now.
Yeah.
And then, you know what? Good job.
Thanks.
We call Cassian our emotionally intelligent king because he is. And he knows exactly what he needs emotionally and why he does it. Quote, Cassian waited until Rhys had winnowed out into the snow and wind before vanishing himself. Cassian knows that what he's going to do requires alone time, and he can't have Rhys there because Rhys will be like, no, man, I'll come with you. Bro love. We just do not appreciate enough how much pain Cassian is going through. When Cassian goes flying, he talks about not using his siphons to shield himself from the cold. Feyre has made it very clear before this that it is freaking cold and her wings are way too sensitive for that. It's just a reminder that temperature control is a form of self-harm. It's the same way that if you were to take a scalding hot shower to the point where it hurts, that's still self-harm.
Poor baby Cassian.
Poor baby Cassian. I shall hug you better. Hug your dick. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry.
Fall has officially started here in Los Angeles, and that means we finally get to do fall activities.
I have been counting down the days for when I can go to pumpkin patches, maybe even hit up an apple orchard, and I get to do all of it looking super cute in my Quince boyfriend sweater.
This weather is perfect for my dark academia vibes, and I'm so excited to bust out my washable silk blouse because you know I'm going to be taking pictures.
Quince is known for their Mongolian cashmere sweaters from $50. And that's not all. Quince has so many other amazing things on their website.
All of those items are priced 50 to 80% less than similar brands.
That includes leather jackets, cotton cardigans, soft denim. Like, my entire fall wardrobe is genuinely turning into Quince wardrobe.
By partnering directly with top factories and cutting out the cost of the middleman, we get savings as the customer.
One of my favorite parts about Quince is the fact that they only work with factories that use safe, ethical, and responsible manufacturing practices. And they still manage to get premium fabrics and finishes for that, luxury feeling for every item that they have.
Get cozy in Quince's high-quality wardrobe essentials. Go to quince.com/booktalk for free shipping on your order and 365-day returns. That's Quince, QUINCE.com/booktalk, BOOKTALK, to get free shipping and 365-day returns. That's quince.com/booktalk.
Move your career further, faster in just 2 days with a Harvard Professional and Executive Development Program. Advance your leadership skills, craft smarter business strategies, build your network, and transform how you work and think to keep your career moving forward. You'll earn a certificate and can add Harvard to your resume with Harvard Professional and Executive Development. Learn more at professional.dce.harvard.edu/Spotify.
Hey, I'm Ryan Reynolds.
Recently, I asked Mint Mobile's legal team if big wireless companies are allowed to raise prices due to inflation. They said yes. And then when I asked if raising prices technically violates those onerous 2-year contracts, they said, "What the f*** are you talking about, you insane Hollywood ass?" So to recap, we're cutting the price of Mint Unlimited from $30 a month to just $15 a month.
Give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
$45 upfront payment equivalent to $15 per month. New customers on first 3-month plan only. Taxes and fees extra. Speed slower above 40 gigabytes. See details.
One theme we'll see throughout this novel is how each of the members of the inner circle is struggling for control as a result of their experiences or trauma during the war with Hybern. Cassian, in an effort to vent his temper that he can't control, goes to his mother's camp that he destroyed years ago. This scene is so important for Silver Flames and for understanding Cassian. His mother, who was thrown out into the snow for being unwed when she gave birth to him, had her baby taken from her only a few years later, was forced to work until she died from it, and Cassian doesn't even know if they buried her body. Part of me wonders if Cassian's mother is still alive just because of the way it's written, but that doesn't really matter here and now for Cassian's narrative. For Cassian, his mother was treated like literal trash. Quote, "So training these women, giving them the resources and confidence to fight back, to look beyond their campfires, it was for her, for the mother buried here, perhaps buried nowhere, so it might never happen again." You can see this resolve in Cassian through the way he respects women and for what he does for the women in Silver Flames by training them. And I just love him so much.
I love him. He talks about really vague memories of kind hands or just like, just the smallest little bit of memories with his mom, and it makes my heart hurt. And I'm convinced she's not dead. If people think that the bone carver's still alive, then his mom is coming back. When I first read Silver Flames, I was convinced that she was going to make an appearance. I've yet to give that up.
Yeah, I think SJM likes to leave things open-ended for sure.
Yeah. I think we can also just view Cassian's chapter as one big foreshadowing chapter, because between talking about Remiel and saying, "Oh, I haven't stepped there since the last time I did my right," and then he, thinking about the right and thinking about everything, it's just Nesta foreshadowing.
It's a lot of foreshadowing.
It is.
Like thick, like his thighs. Sorry.
I was like a cloudy day. It's a rule. One of us must be a pervert at any given time.
It's true.
In chapter 4, we're back to Feyre's point of view. She's out shopping for solstice gifts and it's snowing. This chapter, Feyre is associating snow with art. Quote, "Some, no doubt artists, merely standing on the pale cobblestone and turning in place. Faces uplifted to the gray sky, hair and skin and clothes dusted with fine powder." Feyre assumes that the Fae who are doing this are artists. They're the ones who are able to enjoy the snow, to take a moment and let it fall on their face. That's important because Feyre is about to see the snow as blood. And to me, this shows that she doesn't consider herself as an artist yet.
As Jac said, instead of snow, Feyre has a hard time not seeing the trauma of the city in its place, especially as she walks around the rainbow. Quote, "The door, new. The display window, new. Both had been shattered and stained with blood months ago. It was an effort not to glance at the white dusted stones of the street. Blood had been streaming down these cobblestones then." In fact, like Cassian, Feyre will often visit sites of destruction, and I wonder if, though they struggle to move past the trauma they've endured or the destruction they've seen, if the snow is meant to be a symbol of healing, patching up the wounds of the war like bandages. Or it could be covering up without healing. Could be lots of things.
Personally, I think it might be a representation of fragility, that everything is temporary. Feyre's suffering in Thorns and Roses was temporary, as well as peace, because everything inevitably changes. But snow has so many meanings.
Yeah. Yeah, who knows SJM in her mind?
Knows.
As Feyre looks at the shops, she scurries away when she realizes people are watching her. She moves on from one shop in particular, but thinks that, quote, "I'd spotted a piece that caught my eye, no matter that I wanted to go in." This is a mindset we will encounter with Feyre a lot this novel, as Jac briefly mentioned earlier. There's a lot of denial of self that prevents Feyre from allowing herself anything because she thinks what she has is enough. This is an early, small symptom of what will become a much larger problem.
Feyre stops herself from going inside because Fae are looking at her and she gets really overwhelmed and then leaves. But then on the next page, she talks about like, oh, it's totally cool if people approach me, but it's almost in a high lady situation. Rather than thinking that this is hypocritical, I think it shows that Feyre is more comfortable in her role as high lady than she is in her own skin and her own identity.
We learn that since becoming High Lady, Feyre joins Rhys in hosting weekly audiences to allow citizens of Velaris to come and make requests. Rhys listens to each petitioner, asks questions, and sends them a response. Feyre has learned to do the same. This, to me, is such an obvious contrast to the tithe in the Spring Court. Like we saw in Wings and Ruin, though, the comparison is not explicit. But if you're paying attention, at least for me, it's loud and clear.
Oh, just aggressively screaming at us. Comparison. And it's hard because Feyre makes a couple of these comparisons to Tamlin, but she never mentions his name. So it's understandable if people didn't see that the first time they read it. I didn't. But now it's just like, I see what you're doing.
Yeah. And we'll get into why that might be the case, why it's not explicit when we get to Tamlin, I think. Here's another obvious contrast. Feyre recalls that, quote, once, all I had wanted was enough food, money, and time to paint. Nothing more. I would have been content to let my sisters wed, to remain and care for my father. There is so much in this statement that is in direct conflict with Feyre's current reality. It's almost laughable. It's like SJM looked at where Feyre would be at this point and crafted a vision of what Feyre would want that is the exact opposite and put that at the start of the series. It makes sense. Feyre's circumstances at the start of the series would not allow her to dream beyond the four walls of her family's cabin. It also explains why Feyre's going to struggle with accepting anything more than she already has right now. What she has in this moment is so much more than she ever thought she would have. So why would she need more?
Feyre is suffering through a lot of survivor's guilt, and more than just survivor's guilt with surviving the whole attack on Velaris and everything. I think the specific survivor's guilt that I want to look at here is that there was a time where those three things, the wanting to be fed, wanting to paint, want to make sure her sisters and father were okay, there was a time where that was enough. And now she wants more. She may not know what she wants, but she knows on some level that she wants more. It's guilt that Feyre's even allowed to think that there could be more, to think that she's allowed to even have that. It comes back to surviving, not thriving. Feyre has the opportunity to thrive, and there's a lot of guilt that comes with that. It's part of the many reasons Feyre decides to pick a charity focused on helping humans. The humans are allowed to want more. Unless that more is becoming Fae, then they're not allowed to have that.
Nope, we're done.
I would, if I was one of the humans, I'd be like, I'll have what she's having. 7 High Lords saving me.
Sorry, we lost the cauldron.
No. Feyre roaming around the destroyed parts of the rainbow just has SJM feeding us symbolism left and right. So let me read a couple. Quote, its mint green paint had turned grayish, as if the very light had bled from the color as the building was shattered. Like Feyre was shattered and color bled from her. And also I want to point out that she's wearing a gray coat.
There's a connection there.
Mm-hmm. And then when Feyre almost trips over herself, she grabs the first thing she can to stop herself from falling. A chunk of rock that had come from the wrecked house. Because rock is meant to be her foundation and it's healing and it's all coming from this torn down, destructed place. And then the Fae who used to own the shop, the one who died, and Feyre will eventually take over that shop, their name is, or rather was, Polina. And what do we say? We never trust anything SJM does when we get a name. So Polina is short for Apollinaria, which is derived from the Greek god Apollo, who is the sun god, aka it'll be what helps Feyre get out of her darkness. Thank you and good night.
When Racino begins to talk to Feyre, she mentions that every door in the rainbow is open to Feyre, not as High Lady, but as one of them, as an artist. Feyre thinks, quote, the words settled in, strange, and yet like a piece I had not known was missing, an offered hand I had not realized how badly I wanted to grasp. Also, it references puzzles, which we're going to see more of later on. Just putting that out there.
Mm-hmm.
So this is too big to save for the breadcrumbs. Not only does Feyre physically shake Rosina's hand at this moment, there's also a lot of foreshadowing being done for the studio Feyre will open by the end of the novel with Rosina, the abandoned studio they are currently standing in front of that was owned by Paulina. If you recall from Mist and Fury, when Feyre saw the rainbow early on, she imagined owning a studio there. And now we get to see that dream come alive in this novel, to see Feyre really embrace the artist she's always wanted to be, something she hasn't been able to do since Thorns and Roses. However, Feyre's denial of self comes up again when Mor encounters Feyre shopping. Mor reminds Feyre that they're well off and she could buy a bathtub of jewels without making a dent in their fortune. Feyre thinks in response, quote, I still couldn't wrap my mind around the enormity of Rhys's wealth. My wealth. It didn't feel real, those numbers and figures, like it was child's play money. I only bought what I needed. As we will learn from Feyre later, painting is like this for her right now. It's extravagant, and it's something she has to deny herself. This becomes obvious to readers when Feyre looks around and feels, quote, from a slumbering, quiet place inside me, the painting name flitted by, Frost and Starlight. The place inside Feyre that feels safe and secure enough to paint is slumbering, but we will see it start to come alive again, and with it, a willingness to accept more into Feyre's life.
Finally, a book title that makes sense. Finally, a book title, they say it in the book.
Yeah, which I actually think is cheesy.
No, absolutely, I hate it. But at least it makes more sense than Mist and Fury and Wings and Ruin.
True.
I always think a lot about their wealth because she's like, we're so wealthy. Where do they get their money? Taxes?
Investments.
Do they have like a stock market there? Is it the same currency that they have all through Prythian, or does each court have their own currency?
How does interest work? Do they have banks?
Yeah. When Velaris was locked up, did the economy crash and they had to print more money to get them through it? Like what? I need a little bit more. I don't envy SJM for having to think about all that stuff. Also, more than just Feyre denying herself, we have Mor denying herself. When Feyre asks Mor what she wants for Solstice, Mor runs a finger along a cut stone and says nothing. Almost like Mor is the cut stone playing a part, a role, being what she thinks that she needs to be. Obviously, Mor wants more, and we can guess what it is, but she just won't say it because it's not her story yet.
Gotta wait till your story. Wait your turn.
Yeah. I'm sorry, we can't have multiple main characters.
You're not a main character in your own story right now.
No.
Sorry, Mor.
No, which is funny because I think like with Friends, like everyone's definitely the main character in their own story because everyone's going through their own thing.
Mm-hmm. But SJM isn't giving us a tandem read right now.
I was just thinking about last year and how our different storylines and stuff where like we were both main characters
of very different stories.
Yeah, yours was going on a fun adventure. Mine was just kind of like shipwrecked a little bit. It's like the Tom Hanks movie. Castaway.
Oh.
And you're my volleyball.
Oh.
You're my Wilson. You were my Wilson last year.
I'm sorry?
No, you were a great volleyball.
Okay, great.
No, you were wonderful.
Thank you.
Wilson! Every once in a while. Amy. Every once in a while, when I'm just sitting with Amy, I'll just start, Cassian!
It is my favorite part of the Audible recording. Feyre is back at the townhouse by chapter 5, waiting for Rhys to arrive home before the two of them join Mor for a visit to the Court of Nightmares. Feyre wonders if they should postpone going to the Court of Nightmares given how haggard Rhys seems. But she goes absolutely mother hen when she realizes that Rhys hasn't eaten. In case we've forgotten, Feyre lived her entire adolescence starving and hunting for her family. So yes, she would get fussy if Rhys decides to skip a meal because he's too busy. Don't mess with Feyre when it comes to food. She even withholds sexy time until Rhys eats. And let's also think about the fact that she's serving him. She's forcing him to eat. That's a power thing. And we don't often see Feyre forcing Rhys to eat.
Mm-hmm.
And this is probably the only time. There are several times throughout this novel that we're going to see them feeding each other, which is really sweet. This is the one time where Feyre's like, no, bitch, eat this food.
I mean, there's something about like anyone that you care for when they're just, I don't feel good. I haven't eaten today. And you're just like, what the hell? Why haven't you eaten?
As Jac glares at me from across the room.
That's like our constant. I haven't eaten anything today. And I'm just like, I want to just shove sushi at you, being like, how dare you not eat? But You know, the thing is with this, it's realistic that Feyre would want to give him food, not just because her thing for eating, but Rhys needs a lot of protein in order to maintain his muscles.
And she values those muscles.
So it's a baby time to eat a whole rotisserie chicken. We're shoving that down your mouth because food is power, and also Rhys is feeling lost, but mostly because of the protein.
I do like that you point out that Rhys is feeling lost. It's like Feyre trying to give him
Direction.
Yeah. We also conveniently get information about what it means to be a female high fae with regard to menstrual cycles. And if that is not foreshadowing for silver flames, I don't know what is. Feyre even thinks, quote, I sometimes wondered if waiting until I was ready for children might wind up biting me in the ass. Children are on the brain, and we're going to see how Feyre's perspective shifts on the topic of when she wants to have children. Right now, she's pretty consistent. She doesn't want to have kids right now. A lot of readers and fans struggle with the shift. Our listeners have mentioned it to us before, but we're going to call out how the shift is done in a believable way.
I'm going to say this now, even though it comes up later in the chapter, but Rhys is super cuddly with Feyre, which is also just really freaking adorable, but Rhys is particularly handsy with her stomach. It's mentioned several times that Rhys kisses her stomach, nuzzles it, runs his hands on it, and obviously that's not where babies come from, but when you talk about babies, you know, it's a description of like a swollen stomach type situation. So, more clues.
Or maybe she's got a primordial pouch like I do. And he's like, I just love your little pot belly. Feyre recounts the experience of telling her sisters what to expect when it comes to female high fae menstrual cycles, since they have yet to experience it. And I call this out for many reasons. Let me focus on Nesta first and then Elain. First, Nesta. We see evidence of Nesta's choice to reject faeness in her response or lack thereof. Quote, Nesta had only stared at me in that unblinking, cold way. We're going to continue to see how Nesta rejects her sisters because of their faeness as well in this novel, which is vital to Silver Flames.
I'm going to say that maybe it's Nesta embracing her new lifestyle as well. We know that Nesta is sleeping around, which is not an issue. God, I can't wait to cover that one day. And we know that Nesta is now in her new era. And I think graphic conversations like this don't faze her anymore because she's been dealing with her body and other bodies. And she's like, you think a little bit of blood is the worst thing that's come out of my vagina? Because there's been more.
When Feyre thinks about Nesta having her menstrual cycle while living away from the townhouse where Feyre and Elain can help her, Feyre decides, quote, I'd have to find some way to convince Nesta to send word when hers started. Like hell would I allow her to endure that pain alone. I wasn't sure she could endure that pain alone. Feyre loves Nesta, even if Feyre also underestimates Nesta. I genuinely think Feyre of Mist and Fury would have been like, if you want to be alone, then go ahead and be alone and suffer.
Yeah, absolutely.
But she loves Nesta. She wants to take care of her.
Yeah, I love it.
Let's move on to Elain. When Feyre talks about menstrual cycles, Elain responds by blushing, quote, muttering about the impropriety of such things. I feel like this is a caricature and not a real character moment. And I think that's because that's how Elain thinks she's meant to act, not how she really feels. And it's really annoying.
Yeah, I don't know when it comes to Elain because I feel like you can also look at it as a regression. If Nesta's regressed in her own acceptance of being a fae, then maybe Elain has regressed in her acceptance of her own body and needs, which makes sense to me because she's been denying Lucien, her mate. It's something that her body physically is telling her, go to your mate. He is your mate, but she's denying it. Elain is being told what her body will be doing, and she's in denial and just doesn't want to talk about it.
I think Jac should get some snaps.
Oh, me? I'm snapping for myself too. I'm adding more, like, all these people snapping.
No, I think that's fantastic.
Thank you.
I also want to suggest that Feyre continues to mischaracterize Elain. When Feyre thinks about Elain having her menstrual cycle, Feyre assumes that, quote, Elain at least would be too polite to send Lucien away when he wanted to help. She was too polite to send him away on a normal day. She just ignored him or barely spoke to him. I'm sorry, I don't think I understand the definition of polite because that sounds rude to me. Feyre assumes things about Elaine's actions that simply aren't true and misconstrue it for readers. This is one of many reasons why I can't wait to see Elaine's point of view, because I think we're going to learn a lot about her.
It is so rude. Like, don't say she's just too polite to ignore him and make him feel awkward. No, she's being kind of a bitch.
Yeah.
And I agree with you. There is so much going on with Elaine and Lucien, and over time, we're going to see Elaine have less patience for Lucien in this book and in Silver Flames. And what's going through her mind? You know, like, is she wondering where he's leaving, why he's gone for so long, what's going on with Vasa? There are so many options.
Can I say something?
Yeah.
There are so many options. And just like you said earlier, her body is pushing her towards him. So what if she's rude to him because she wants to get him away faster?
Oh, yeah.
She can't resist the pull.
Every time she sees him, she's probably thinking, oh, he's not that bad. His eye are so dreamy. That was a real mistake. That one is real good, though.
She might be into his metal eye. You don't know.
Oh, I'd be into it. It can see things.
X-ray vision.
X-ray vision. The way that I'd use that, I just say, I don't know why my mind first went to, tell me which stall is available for the bathroom. Where is that? That's the X-ray vision I want to know. Am I alone in this bathroom, or is there an audience here?
That's hilarious.
But, Feyre even mentions that Elaine is mourning Grayson.
Mm-hmm.
Bish, how do you know?
You don't know that.
You don't know. You're assuming that she misses Grayson. She could be over him real fast of saying, wow, you were quite weak and annoying. But to stay on this whole Nesta and Elaine conversation, Rhys says that he cannot forgive Nesta. Absolutely. Like, she hurt Feyre at such a young age, forced her to go hunt. And Feyre said that if you blame one sister, then you have to blame the other. And Rhys is all like, nope, I don't care. Nesta is Illyrian at heart, and she should have been better. But Elaine is Elaine. Screw that. A,
it's a double standard. B, what this is telling me is Rhys views Nesta more like an equal than he does Elaine.
Yeah, I kind of talked a little bit about that,
yeah.
And I want to discuss that a bit more. He coddles Elaine.
Yeah.
And doesn't value her as a person. And we know that because he keeps referring to her as an object.
Yeah, as a possession.
Versus Nesta has always been her own spitfire of a human, and Faye, and Rhys likes that on some level.
Yeah, for sure. I wonder if Elaine reminds him of his sister, and so he has to put her on a shelf to keep her safe.
I just don't imagine his sister being that docile, passive. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, we don't know, but yeah, I don't understand Rhys and his relationship with Elaine. And I wonder if it's going to come back to bite him in the ass when it gets to Elaine's point of view.
I think it will. I definitely believe that the way that he views her and the way that he interacts and everything will not be great for him.
Mm-hmm.
And I hope it hurts. I hope you feel like shit about it, Rhys, because this is a shit logic.
Yeah, agreed. Agreed. As Feyre and Rhys share thoughts about their day, Feyre talks about Rosina's invitation for Feyre to paint with her painting group. Feyre admits that it feels selfish to paint because there's so much to do. And while this goes back to everything I've been saying about Feyre's self-denial, it's also a nice marker of how much more self-aware Feyre has become over the course of her journey, which we haven't always seen a lot of. I would almost argue that she's become more self-aware since the Ouroboros.
This entire section is super sweet and it melts my heart because they just keep touching and kissing, but talking and opening up. It's sex. Sex is healing, and that physical connection, that emotional connection, it's what they need from one another to heal.
At one point, Rhys comments that Feyre was, quote, born on the longest night of the year. You were meant to be by my side from the very beginning. I bring this up because it's a callback to Mist and Fury, when Rhys and Feyre visited the Archeron family estate when Nesta and Elaine were still human. It was then that Rhys first learned that Feyre was born on Solstice, and he kind of got quiet and we never saw a follow-up. So this is that follow-up, and it's a nice closing of the loop on SJM's part. There's also this callback, a mark of how much Rhys loves Feyre. In Mist and Fury, Rhys explained that the tattoos above his knees were a symbol of how he would bow to no one but his crown and his court. Yet, here, Rhys tells Feyre, quote, "I love you. More than life, more than my territory, more than my crown." Get you a man that does that.
I would love a man who has a crown and then loves me more.
Give me your crown, bitch.
Give me your crown, aka Meghan Markle. That's just, and they make me so happy, Meghan and Harry. But, you know, I want to end this chapter on a note that we're all very familiar with, and that is fuck you more for being, once again, a massive cockblock. Rhys is naked. He is in Feyre's hand. They are getting ready to. And then she comes in, by the way, we're leaving in 30 minutes. 30 minutes is plenty of time. Plenty of time. Like, what is the point of having magic to just magic your hair and clothes ready? No. They could have tried harder. Yeah, lost opportunity. They could have tried harder. Also, I'm just mad at Mor.
Chapter 6 opens with the first instance of Mor's point of view, which tells me we're going to eventually get more of her point of view in a future ACOTAR novel. That's me speculating, folks. When Mor describes the court of nightmares, she observes the darkness as being, quote, the darkness of rotting things, of decay. This reminds me of Feyre's description of the autumn court in Wings and Ruin, the smell of loam and rotting things. I think this was intentional on SJM's part because there's a direct tie between the Court of Nightmares and the Autumn Court in the form of Eris and her father, Keir. This is realized a couple pages later when Mor remembers the moment Eris found her nailed down in the Autumn Court. She recalls the, quote, earthen scent of rotting things.
I wonder if, I mean, it's all symbolism and it's great, but like, wouldn't it be cool if Baron was physically rotting because of his power? If you think back to the Spring Court and the land is so ingrained with Tamlin and his power, that's what we can tell. Like, if the High Lord is in power, then the land's doing well. Mm-hmm. But if his land's rotting, then maybe his powers aren't doing well. Mm. Maybe that's why he didn't want to go run into battle because he knows he's too weak. Ooh.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm.
When we see Eris, we learn he's wearing a pewter-colored jacket. And I wonder if this is SJM trying to signal that Eris is a morally gray character.
Yeah, it is. It totally is. I did not realize that, and I love that you pointed that out.
It's just the little things, folks.
It is.
We get a sense in this chapter that Mor despises her gift. We've really ragged on Mor's gift of truth the last couple seasons. In Mor's memory, we learn that, quote, her gift had left her here in the Autumn Court, broken and bleeding. And later, Mor will think that truth is both her gift and her curse. What does it mean?
Some of our listeners have theorized that Mor's powers are either dimmed or gone because she's not being honest with herself, and I can totally see that in relation to what you just pointed out.
Yeah. Mor views Eris as being unfeeling during this encounter. Quote, nothing had ever disturbed him, ruffled him. Mor had hated it from the moment she'd met him, that distance, that coldness, that lack of interest or feeling for the world. This is the mask we know Eris wears, and it's really sad that Mor can't see past it. Not that I blame her, though.
There's also a lot that happens in this flashback. There's signs that maybe Eris might not have been the bad guy, like when he asked if Mor wanted to be there. Just kind of that like, ooh, do you really want to be here or not? And then I'm getting this really good smutty mafia book idea. They're betrothed, and then she doesn't want to be involved, so she sleeps with someone else, and her family is absolutely enraged, so they discard her. She knows that she's going to die, so like when Eris says, oh, do you want to stay here? Obviously, he's looking for that no, but in my smutty mafia, she says yes, and then it's also like forced engagement or forced marriage because, you know, he could have gotten out, and he does it to protect her, and now she's in this like even darker mafia situation. I'm okay, you guys, 2025, no.
I want to spend a moment appreciating the use of light in this chapter. The chapter starts with darkness, Mor hating the lack of light in the Court of Nightmares. We learn that Keir hates the colors Mor wears. Quote, the red gown Mor wore, bright and bold, or the gold jewelry at her wrists, her ears shimmering like sunlight down here in the gloom. And then the chapter closes with Mor following, quote, her high lord and lady through the darkness and back into the light. So obviously, the imagery here is Court of Nightmares equals darkness equals evil. Velaris equals light equals good. I think with the use of this imagery, we can truly understand for the first time Mor's perspective when she's in the Court of Nightmares, and just how much she may have been hurt by Rhys in Wings and Ruin when he brought Eris to the Court of Nightmares. Not only does Mor regularly relive her trauma by returning to the darkness of the Court of Nightmares and the darkness of her early life, which she obviously rejects through her clothing, but she now also has to relive the traumatic experience in the Autumn Court on a regular basis too. And that makes me sympathize with her more. It also conveys to us why it hurts that Rhys agreed to allow Kier to come to Velaris. Rhys has given the darkness permission to intrude on her only source of light. And this is super important to remember because Rhys and Mor haven't really truly made amends about this. And that's going to come up again in the novel.
Yep. Let's power through some breadcrumbs, and I will say multiverse spoilers. In Chapter 1, as Feyre contemplates the fact that she struggles with the trauma of Rhys having died even though he was brought back to life, she feels, quote, that bond again flowing between us like a river of star-flecked night. The bond is like a river, aka their new home that Rhys will purchase for Feyre, which is on the river.
And I think she calls the river house.
Oh,
yeah. Also in Chapter 1, quote, Rhys's amusement rippled toward me, caressing my innermost self with night-veiled hands. And for some reason, this feels like foreshadowing of how they're going to fuck each other mind to mind later on.
Yeah, I really struggled with that when we talked about it in the prep. If you don't know what we're talking about, join our Trophy Wives. And
it's real, folks.
I get real confused. In Chapter 2, Cassian says to Rhys, quote, I get jealous sometimes. I never begrudge you for your happiness. But what you two have, it's the legends, the lie that they spin to us when we were children about the glory and wonder of the mating bond. I thought it was all bullshit, and then you two came along. Don't worry, Cassian, you have a mate too. I bet he knows. He knows. They all know.
Maybe.
They all know.
Also in Chapter 2, Rhys says to Cassian, quote, I get this feeling that it's all some sort of joke, some sort of cosmic trick, and that no one can be this happy and not pay for it. And that's foreshadowing Feyre's potentially fatal pregnancy in Silver Flames.
Yep. In Chapter 3, quote, Remiel, the sacred mountain, the heart of not only Illyria, but the entirety of the Night Court. None were permitted on its barren, rocky slopes, save for the Illyrians, and only once a year at that. During the blood rite, Remiel had always felt alive somehow, awake and watchful. This foreshadows Silver Flames, but it also feels like it's going to come up again in Crescent City.
I bet there's someone in Ramiel. I bet Ramiel's a person.
Wait, really?
Why not?
The mountain's a person.
Why not?
This is like giving me Sailor Moon vibes, but I love it.
Again with Ramiel in Chapter 3. Quote, who had put that stone atop the peak? He didn't know either. Legend said it had existed before the Night Court formed, before the Illyrians migrated from the Myrmidons, before humans had even walked the earth. Even with the fresh snow crusting Ramiel, none had touched the Pillar of Stone. This feels multiverse related to me. Could it be like the gates in Crescent City?
In Chapter 4, Feyre tells Mor, quote, Rhys says Solstice isn't about getting gifts you need, but rather the ones you never buy for yourself. Apropos, since he buys Feyre a new house.
Yeah, he does. I want someone to buy me a house.
Oh my god, please.
Chapter 4, again, when Feyre talks about Elaine giving Azriel Truth Teller back, quote, Elaine had given it back, had pressed it into Azriel's hands after the battle, just as he had pressed it into hers before, and then walked away without looking back. Just like the necklace in the secret chapter.
There's so many people who don't know about the secret chapter. Please Google Silver Flames Azriel's secret chapter. It was part of a special Barnes & Noble release from Azriel's point of view.
It's so good.
It happens after Solstice, and
it's so good.
In Chapter 5, Feyre, quote, I hadn't forgotten the bone carver's vision of their future son. How he'd appeared to me. I knew Rhys hadn't, but he hadn't pushed or asked. Ironic that they'll orgasm to the same image when Feyre decides that she wants to have kids. Totally intentional. It's just weird to have that visual. I think it would have been better for her to like throw a mental image of her being pregnant.
No.
Okay. No, imagine a child. That's great. That's great.
I mean, for them, I don't know.
No.
They're weird. In Chapter 5, Rhys says to Feyre, quote, Nesta is... She's Illyrian. I mean that as a compliment, but she's an Illyrian at heart. Like her womb will be soon.
She's Illyrian at womb.
She's Illyrian at uterus.
At uterus, yeah. It's a Illyriudus. And finally, in chapter 6, as Moore recalls her traumatic memory of the Autumn Court after she was abused by her father, she thinks, quote, she would rather die and return as something wicked and cruel and shred them all apart. Is this a nod to the link in mythology between the Morrigan and Banshees?
I think so.
I think so.
Going back to our question at the start of the episode, are the Inner Circle members ready for healing?
It's my answer.
Meh.
Not yet. I mean, I think they're all aware that they're not healing.
I wonder if they are, though. I don't think they're very aware.
I think they're all aware that they're avoiding.
Okay.
And I think if you know you're avoiding, which they all, like Feyre keeps looking at her to-do list, or, I mean, Feyre even says, if I'm not working, then the thoughts will come in.
Mm-hmm.
Rhys, he's probably something similar of like, you know, he keeps thinking like, oh, I got to do this. I have to do this. Like his list is a mile long. And then Cassian has to go to his special place in order to, which is actually not very special. It's a traumatic place.
Yeah.
In order to process. I think they all know that there's a lot of things not happening and nothing's clicking. But the story will end with Feyre and Rhys ready to heal and Nesta and Cassian just fucked.
Yeah, they've kind of just slapped a bandage on it, hoping that they're not going to bleed through it. They're like barely holding it together.
I think the one word summary I give for Nesta and Cassian for the end of the book is fine. How are you doing? Fine. No, I'm fine. Are you good? No, I'm fine. I'm fine. Are you sure? No, I'm fine. I'm fine. It's fine.
Yeah, I think that we find all of our characters in a space where they don't know how to heal.
Mm-hmm.
If they're aware that they need healing, they don't know what that looks like.
I mean, it's all new to them, right? Like Rhys has never had to heal with a mate.
Right.
And Cassian's never had to heal from the love of his life.
Yeah.
How aware he is of that, which I do think he's probably aware, and we're just not seeing it. He's probably super aware. No, we know for a fact he's aware because he tells Nesta when he thinks he's going to die, my biggest regret is not having enough time with you. I'll find you again.
Yeah.
He knows he loves her.
Yeah.
And it's like, I mean, these are all new forms of trauma. It's not the good old-fashioned war kind anymore.
Right.
They can historically figure that out and be like, oh, it's not a fun path, but I know how to cope through it. Now they're trying to figure out what healing's like when you have other aspects.
And we get to see some of that in this book.
Yeah. And now this week's feature review from Apple Podcasts.
This review is from Kat, titled, This Podcast, Don't Sleep on It. I'm so grateful I found this. It has felt like having friends, and also just hearing a series we all love in a new analysis. I have also caught up from the beginning in a month, which is a normal amount to listen to, right? I love that it has changed my analyses of other books too, because of the themes you discuss, and I think it enriches my perspective as a reader, and I appreciate even books I don't love better than I used to. Thank you, ladies, for this cool space and sharing it with us. Chef's kiss.
Oh, so much there to love and appreciate.
Yeah.
I love it when people feel like they're talking to their friends.
Mm-hmm.
And it blows me away that anyone could listen to us that much in such a short amount of time.
Yeah, you guys, that's way more dedication than even I have to us sometimes.
I tune us out while listening to us.
I do too. But that being said, Kat, I love when people tell us that they're able to analyze different books now because of what we've said on the podcast. And that just gives me hope that we're doing something good and worthwhile. So thank you.
Yeah, look at that. Thank you. If you'd like your review read on the podcast, please go to Apple Podcasts and leave a 5-star written review. Thank you for listening to this week's episode of Book Talk for Book Talk. We encourage you to rate and subscribe to our show on your preferred podcast listening platform. Next week, we'll be exploring chapters 7 through 13 of A Court of Frost and Starlight.
We would love to hear your thoughts based on today's conversation. You can submit your comments to our form at booktalkforbooktalk.com for a chance to have your feedback discussed during a weekly mini episode.
If you're enjoying the podcast, please visit our website, booktalkforbooktalk.com, to view our latest merch and learn about supporting the show through Patreon, Ko-Fi, or Venmo.
Bye! Fall has officially started here in Los Angeles, and that means we finally get to do fall activities.
I have been counting down the days for when I can go to pumpkin patches, maybe even hit up an apple orchard, and I get to do all of it looking super cute in my Quince boyfriend sweater.
This weather is perfect for my dark academia vibes, and I'm so excited to bust out my washable silk blouse because you know I'm going to be taking pictures.
Quince is known for their Mongolian cashmere sweaters from $50. And that's not all. Quince has so many other amazing things on their website.
All of those items are priced 50 to 80% less than similar brands.
That includes leather jackets, cotton cardigans, soft denim. Like, my entire fall wardrobe is genuinely turning into Quince wardrobe.
By partnering directly with top factories and cutting out the cost of the middleman, we get savings as the customer.
One of my favorite parts about Quince is the fact that they only work with factories that use safe, ethical, and responsible manufacturing practices. And they still manage to get premium fabrics and finishes for that, luxury feeling for every item that they have.
Get cozy in Quince's high-quality wardrobe essentials. Go to quince.com/booktalk for free shipping on your order and 365-day returns. That's Quince, QUINCE.com/booktalk, BOOKTALK, to get free shipping and 365-day returns. That's quince.com/booktalk.
Ryan Reynolds here from Mint Mobile. With the price of just about everything going up during inflation, we thought we'd bring our prices down. So to help us, we brought in a reverse auctioneer, which is apparently a thing.
Mint Mobile Unlimited Premium Wireless. How to get 30, 30, bit to get 30, bit to get 20, 20, 20, bit to get 20, 20, bit to get 15, 15, 15, 15, just $15 a month? Sold!
Give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
$45 upfront payment equivalent to $15 per month. New customers on first 3-month plan only. Taxes and fees extra. Speed slower above 40 gigabytes per detail.